And before that, a little piece called Don't Worry About the Government. And of course, we never worry about the government. And right now on the line, we are lucky enough, pleased to have progressive activist, Medea Benjamin, on the line, and she will be at the bookstore in Huntington this week. And we'll get more to that in a second. But Medea, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
The book is, I got the initial book last year, but I understand there's a new print of it, a little updated. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, so much has happened in the last year that I felt it was important to update the book. I mean, when I wrote this book, there was very little in the news about drones at all, and now, oh my goodness, I mean, from Rand Paul's 13-hour filibuster to the UN now doing a investigation about war crimes, and all kinds of things have come out. Oh, the Stanford and NYU studies called Living Under Drones. So I added a bunch of new updates.
Yeah, it's a for those who have not read it and are not familiar, it is the details of details and philosophy, really, behind drone warfare that the United States is perpetrating about the world. Medea, one big question I have before we get into the details of that is, you go to so many things where you show up and interrupt people and protest and make fantastic statements. Don't they see you coming from a mile away, Medea?
Yeah, they do sometimes, and sometimes they don't. When we were at the National Rifle Association press conference, which was a huge thing, tons of press, my colleague and I just sat in there, kind of snuck in and sat in there for an hour without anybody even saying anything to us. So sometimes they don't notice us, but at Congress they can't stop us. Well, they try, but they really can't stop you from coming in because of the public hearing. But what they tell us while we're online is, if you so much as hold up a little sign or say anything, we'll have you arrested. Right.
Okay, so now let's get to the meat of the book. You're coming down to Huntington this week to do some signing and make an appearance there. And tell us about what the book is about. What's so many people think drone warfare. Well, our guys aren't getting killed. Isn't that a better thing? Tell us about what's wrong with this whole approach.
Well, I go through the book very systematically, but in I would say, not academic at all kind of way, much more readable. Why it's a myth that our government has sold us the line that the drones are cheap, that they're more humane because they're so precise, and that they keep our soldiers risk-free, and that they are the only option to having tens of thousands of soldiers occupying other countries. And I take in each chapter a look at what's the reality in terms of who's getting killed, a whole chapter on the victims because we never hear about them. I do a whole chapter on who are the pilots and how is it affecting them to be sitting in the United States thousands of miles away and pressing a button to kill somebody. And I look at the legal issues, the ethical and moral issues involved. And I also talk a lot about the proliferation because I think it's important for people to know that the U.S. is now selling these drones overseas, and so are the Israelis and the Chinese, and everybody wants drones. So what kind of model are we setting for the world where we can go anywhere we want, kill anyone we want, without declaring war or anything, and it's all on the basis of secret information, which is another very important thing that I discuss in the book, that this is done by the CIA and the secretive agencies of the military, and it's done in a way that the American people don't even know what's happening. So it's a very undemocratic way of waging war.
Well, it's not only undemocratic here, but it's also does a lot of collateral damage when these drones go out. So it seems like the U.S. just seems to release information about, yes, target was hit, so-and-so, such and such a horrible terrorist is dead, but they don't usually mention and their families and everybody around there, and we missed them, and a whole bunch of other people are dead. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yes. In fact, they lie right out. John Brennan, who's now the head of the CIA and was previously the counterterrorism czar for Obama, said in 2011 that we hadn't killed a single civilian with our drones, and then said after a year later that was only a handful, which is crazy. We've killed thousands of people with the drones, and only 2% have been identified as being high-value targets. So there's major questions about who the other thousands are. And yes, the U.S. doesn't tell us who's being killed, but on the other receiving end, there's no acknowledgement, there's no apologies for hitting the wrong target, there's no compensation, and so it creates this tremendous hatred for the United States, not only in the places where we're using the drones, like in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, but also throughout the world where people see this is a very barbaric form of warfare, with one side putting no risk at all, and the other side getting killed in a very cavalier fashion.
Yeah, there was, I believe, just a few weeks ago, there was a wedding party that was hit by some drones.
There have been wedding parties and funerals and community meetings, and people hit while they're sleeping in their homes and while they're driving in their cars. I mean, the sense that people have in the place where we're using these is that no place is safe. The kids are afraid to go to school. Parents are afraid to go to the marketplace. So it's really disrupted life in entire communities, and I would say it's akin to collective punishment, because if you're going after one or two individuals, but you're terrorizing entire communities, you are acting as if those people, all those innocent people, were somehow responsible for the actions of one or two individuals.
Yeah, it's a true tragedy. Now, of course, this quote unquote technology is also being targeted right back here for use with supposedly for use with police forces, with all kinds of surveillance techniques. How is that progressing? Because you hardly ever hear anything about it. Once in a while, of course, you hear one little tiny thing, and then you hear nothing. Is this being pursued by the government?
Yes, and I hope people will come to the book review, the bookstore, to talk about this, because I'll explain who has licenses to use drones here in the United States now, how's it being used, why these are test cases for what's to come, and how communities are already starting to fight back, both at the city level and the state level, and then what's happening nationally. It's actually very exciting, and I'm quite enthused about the kind of movement that's being created, both to stop the killer drones overseas as well as to stop the proliferation of drones here at home. But if we don't do something about it, predictions are there's going to be 20 or 30,000 drones in our skies in the next decade, and that it could turn the U.S. into a 24/7 surveillance society. And after the Boston killings, the drone manufacturers had a field day and said, see, every police station needs their own drones, every community needs their drones, and I think it's important that we talk about what level of surveillance we're willing to live with in a society that we want to continue to call democratic and free.
Right. It's always trading the freedoms for security. I found it very encouraging recently where there was some poll. I think it was shown on PBS, the poll results. But the poll basically showed that Americans currently are less willing to give up freedoms for quote-unquote security. And I think that that's a good sign. I think hopefully the more work people like you do in bringing this out to the public more, unlike what the media does, the bigger the movement will get. It's very encouraging that you see those little bits.
Well, that's right, and I think we can have a lively discussion at the bookstore, because there are all kinds of things that people can do and are doing. And I think getting people involved is so important, because if we don't engage in this, we are going to be living in a surveillance society and a world of chaos and lawlessness, because these drones have the potential to take us down this very, very dangerous path, given the model that the U.S. is putting forth. I was with somebody from the UN today who's in the middle of a very important investigation that's going to come out soon, looking at whether the U.S. committed war crimes or not. The Pakistanis, where I was recently, have just done for the first time a high court decision saying that the drones are illegal and a violation of sovereignty. So there's a lot going on in this, and I think it's exciting that I'll have a time on Friday night to talk with people in the Huntington area about what's happening and what we can do.
Fantastic. Now, just a little off subject for a second, could you talk a little about your organization for people who are not familiar with it, Code Pink, what it's all about, what your mission is, what you try to do with Code Pink?
Yes, we're a peace group led by women, but not exclusive to women. We started after 9/11 trying to find a non-violent way of resolving the conflict, treating 9/11 as a crime and not a war. And we have been tried to stop the war in Iraq. We are advocating for troops coming home from Afghanistan. And we go to these regions all the time. So I personally have been to Afghanistan many times, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan. We're on our way to doing a trip to Yemen in June. And we're very involved with setting up contacts with groups on the ground, looking for alternatives to militarism, and we're very involved here at home as well on trying to see how, particularly with the sequestration and economic crisis, how we can cut down on the military and redirect our money into more of the human needs and ways to address the global climate chaos that we're experiencing.
That's one place you didn't mention that you have been recently, which was actually made mainstream news, which I think is fantastic, is when you were over in Palestine and doing some work with the supplying there. You want to speak a little about that?
Oh, yes, and it's important to talk about Israel in the context of the drones as well, since they are the number one exporter of drones, and they are constantly using drones against the Palestinians. So we have been involved in Code Pink in trying to break the blockade of Gaza by sending boats there. We have gone there 8 times in the last, since 2008. And we're very involved in the movement for justice in Palestine. And another place I recently went that I didn't mention was Bahrain, right. A place where there's a very exciting democracy movement that has been crushed by Saudi Arabia. So we're constantly traveling to the region and being inspired, like we were in Egypt, where I was during the Egyptian Revolution. In Tunisia, I was just there recently, constantly being inspired by people on the ground who are really risking their lives to bring greater democracy to their own countries. We certainly should be able to do more here to bring more democracy to our own country.
Absolutely. Medea, I know you're very, very busy this week and in general all the time. We'd like to thank you for your great work. And the book, of course, is Drone Warfare, and you will be at Book Review in Huntington this Friday night at 7 p.m. We'll have even more details of it throughout the show. And Medea, thanks for spending some time with us this evening, and we shall see you on Friday night right here in Huntington on Long Island.
Terrific. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks so much, Medea.
Bye.
Medea Benjamin, right here on WUSB Stony Brook.